Hola, muy buenas. Welcome everyone. We are in this special anniversary month, remembering House of the Dragon, remembering The Rise of the Dragon, the book that was released last year. And I wanted to talk about a Song of Ice and Fire theories and essays and a lot of amazing stuff with my good friend from Germany. A person I really appreciate him a lot. I I sent him my first email 10 years ago. It's an honor to be talking with you. Stefan Sasse, welcome here.
Thank you, man. The honor is mine, actually. Now you have surpassed me in fame and beauty and everything else that is necessary. So thank you for having me.
Well, not at all, not at all. What you have written is history. Stefan is a historian. I can assure that I have been with Stefan in the Germany History Museum in Berlin. I will never forget that when we were in Asim Westeros. Do you remember that? The first time we met each other in person, 2019, if I recall correctly. Wow! Before the pandemic, all times. So, but he's a historian. So, but I bring him here not because he knows a lot about the story of the world and politics, of course, and but because he's for me an amazing expert about A Song of Ice and Fire and his world, and also for me he's a great analyst about TV shows, about book shows. In his podcast, in Boiler Audio Hour, the podcast that he most of the time records with Santi Collins, but other time with other guests, he analyzes a lot of stuff, and I absolutely love how analyzes everything. So but I think you have talked about this in the past on Reddit, on some other interviews of Just. But for the people of my channel and Los Terrenos that doesn't know you, how do you discover A Song of Ice and Fire, and why you decided to write about it, to talk about it online?
I've been with the community for quite some time now. I started reading the books in 2005 for the first time, reread them obviously in 2006, and then started to get a little bit into the community with reading up on theories and trying to get explanations for stuff. And at some point, I decided to write my own things because I have a longer history of writing about stuff. When I like things, I start writing about them. That has always been a thing that I'm doing. And so this felt natural for Song of Ice and Fire as well. The first thing I ever wrote was
before in other fandoms like or Star Wars or board games. That I love board games. So what would you write about before A Song of Ice and Fire?
The most prolific writing I did before was on the role-playing system that I played at the time and still play. It's a German role-playing system. The English version is called The Dark Eye. In German, it's Das Schwarze Auge, which is the most famous German role-playing system, but it hasn't that many players, so you probably never heard of it. But I really do like
It's like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that?
Come again?
It's like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that?
It's a fantasy role-playing system, yeah, but it's more low fantasy than Dungeons and Dragons. It has more fantasy in it than A Song of Ice and Fire. It is a little bit more on the fairy tale side of things, if that makes any sense.
So you wrote about it before A Song of Ice and Fire, and then you discovered A Song of Ice and Fire. And why did you become so hooked with A Song of Ice and Fire?
I just love these books. I mean, it wasn't love on first sight, I have to say. I liked them all right when I read them. I liked them a little bit more when I reread them, but it was over the course of many rereads that they grew more and more on me, and that I got to think about them, and that I wrote about them, etc. And so this was more of a process. I wasn't in head over heels, I have to admit. It took me a while to see the light, basically.
No, like everyone is. No. I know. I think almost no one that in the first reading he says, "Okay, John is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Oh, Aegon is fake. Oh, all the things that now seems like so obvious. I didn't got it in my first reading of the books, and not many people got those things in the first reading of the books. It's complicated. George writes very well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people are more intelligent than me on first read. The problem for me is always I'm a sloppy reader, so I need to read stuff several times, and I will miss many things on the first try. That is just a part of my reading process. There are other people who read more deliberately and more slowly, and so they will catch more things on the first try. I need several.
I remember that I invited you, Los Terrenos. I don't know, it was I think for a Game of Thrones and a Clash of Kings anniversary. And you were talking about some library that they lend you the books. What's the story of how you actually got the books? Because I think it's a funny story of A Song of Ice and Fire. One summer, I remember it was one summer that you started reading or something like that.
No, I didn't get them in a library. I got the introduction to the books from my local fantasy store, and
Yes,
the
it
owner
was a store, not a library. Okay, it was a store. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The owner was always trying to push them on me, and I was like a little bit skeptical. And the argument he used was that the sex scenes were so graphical, and I was like, "Great, this is not the reason I read books." But at some point, I didn't have anything else to read, so I tried them out, and then I got hooked.
Oh, great. And I have talked with you many times because there is not like a big, I think, A Song of Ice and Fire community in Germany, or at least not they don't do like presential events. You talk about people online, but you don't do gatherings like we have done in Spain and of course in UK and US and in other places. So you always say that the German community is more online. You don't gather as much, but how do you decide? Okay, there is a fandom about this world that I like, so I may write something on Westeros.org. I may write something on Tower of the Hand. How did you get into those online communities?
I started off with a German community. I don't remember which. It was just a message board, basically, and I started to write there. But the community didn't click with me. I just didn't find the connection to them. And then I graduated quickly to the Tower of the Hand and the stuff there. I was never active on the Westeros.org boards. For some reason, I missed them in my beginning, and later on, I never got into them. And I think they were past their prime at that point anyway. So the discussions were all very, very detailed, let's put it like that.
Yeah.
And I started reading up on the Tumblr scene, and so it came just natural to me trying to connect to these people. And if I wanted to connect to these people, I needed to write in English. And so I left the German community behind because they obviously all write in German, and they are referencing the German translations of the books. And I started to migrate to the English versions of the books. I haven't touched the German versions since 2006, basically. Since then, I've always used the original versions. And so if you want to discuss stuff, you need to reference the language version that you're using. And I don't know how it's in Spanish, but in German, in the translation, they also translated some of the names. So it becomes increasingly difficult to reference this stuff. And so I didn't even try, and completely disconnected from the German community. So I cannot tell you anything about these guys, actually.
Now, in Spain, it depends of the book. The usual protocol is that they translate the name of the locations, but most of the time they don't translate the name of the people. But sometimes they translate, for example, for the bastards. It's not, they call it John Nieve, that Nieve means snow in Spanish. So the surnames they translate, but they don't translate, for example, the name of the houses. And so I guess if you are Spanish, you can debate with a Spanish guy about A Song of Ice and Fire. But if you hear someone who speaks English, you may miss the name of the places, because some of them has a very different translation. For example, how do you say Winterfell in German? Because Winterfell in Spanish means Invernalia and doesn't mean winter ending or winter falling. It just means like the place of winter, but has nothing with the falling, the end, that for me is key of the Winterfell name. How do you say Winterfell in German, and what does it mean?
They kept the name, actually, but without the connotations. That's a little bit of a problem, because Winterfell is also a German word. It just means winter fur. So you can keep it, and it sounds German. You can just pronounce it German, and it's a perfectly German word, but it loses all meaning, basically, because now you have a name that is essentially talking about the fur of an animal in winter.
Yeah, I know the Spanish translator of A Song of Ice and Fire. I know her since a lot of years, Cristina Macías, and I remember that they in translation they don't always try to use a direct translation. For example, a river run is in Spanish called aguas dulces, that would mean sweet water. and Sweetwater has nothing to do with river. But apparently it sounded nice. It sounded like a place you would like to visit. Of course, it related river, water. So some translations are beautiful, but has nothing to do with the original meaning. For example, how did you translate in German the river run, for example?
They call it Schnellwasser, which translates to swift water.
It's more similar than the Spanish one. Well, translation is very difficult, so it's very difficult to translate anything. So ask me that I am going to translate this video into Spanish. Before entering a Song of Ice and Fire, I have quoted. I think you are the person I have quoted more in the world, because I have done many interviews. I am very lucky in my life. I remember even with big newspaper in Spain, in El País, El Mundo, bigger newspaper. And I every time I talk about the Nerdstream era, and I always say, it's a concept that I don't know if he invented that concept. That was the first time I heard about it was from my friend, a German friend, Stefan Sasse, that he's an analyst, but he's an historian. And he always talk about, we are now living since a decade ago in the Nerdstream era. So for the people of the audience that doesn't know what it is, what it means that we live now in the Nerdstream era.
This is a concept that by now seems very intuitive. And if I explain to you now what it means, you will say, duh, that's the world we live in. But when I started my blog in 2012, and I thought about a name for it and what I wanted to do, it was still a very new idea. So let's go a little bit back in history. I was born in 1984. So my youth has been in the 1990s and early 2000s. And back then, nerd stuff was still nerd stuff. So if you were interested in fantasy or science fiction or video games, you were like on the outside. This was not something that you would do as a cool kid. It's not like today where you can be a cool kid and play video games. It was essentially either or. And the same was true about many things. Now you can be on the beach and in the gym and be cool and be with the women and all of that, and you can still be into Harry Potter. That just wasn't possible back then. And this started to change at the end of the 2000s, beginning of the 2010s. And I tried to give a word to it, and the word I came up with was the Nerdstream, as a mix of nerd culture on the one hand and mainstream on the other hand. So nerd culture was going mainstream, enter the Nerdstream. And so I called my blog the Nerdstream era, in which we are still living today. The name didn't catch on, unfortunately, but thanks for trying.
You invented the term. I didn't know. I wasn't sure if you invented the term. So you actually invented the term.
I did invent it for me. I don't know if anyone else ever used it, but I didn't hear it before. So I came up with it independently.
I have repeated it, I told you, a lot of times in interviews with serious newspaper, because I totally have the concept, and when I say about that, and they say the Nerdstream era, and I explain the concept more or less what you said, it was worse because I invited it, but and at the end, and that was the headline of one interview I did with a newspaper in Spain, I think it was La Razón, and I say, at the end, we the geeks, we have won. I am very sorry for the popular guys, but we the geeks, we have won. Because if you want to go to the cinema, well, now Marvel is not in his best time, but 2 years ago, the most popular and best-selling movies, all Marvel movies, Star Wars movies. The most popular TV show on Earth, Game of Thrones, a very geek thing. Video games, everybody plays video games. Everyone and their mother, even in the subway, they are playing video games. So Stranger Things, a very popular show, it's about nerd guys. So we have won. I am very sorry, you people that you don't like us, but winners are winning all the time. So it's crazy. It's crazy when you think about the previous decades.
Yeah, and it's a victory that's so complete that it has lost any meaning, because theory goes, now we have the Nerdstream. So if you say the geeks won, there aren't any geeks anymore, like in that sense. We just everything melted into each other, you know.
Geek, so it has no merit to be geek now.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree with you. Well, now let's enter in the A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones discussion. And I interviewed you after 1 year after the release of the final episode of the House of the Dragon. You have been analyzing the show in your podcast in Boiler Audio Hour. I am a proud patron of Boiler Audio Hour, and 1 year later,
Thank you for supporting us.
No, 1 year later, and after digesting everything, and you may have checked some of the news about the new season, but it more or less will follow the book of Fire and Blood. They won't invent many things. So what is your general impression? What is your general review of the show 1 year after it was aired? Are you happy with it? I think so.
Yeah, I was very happy with the House of the Dragon, and I wasn't sure I would be. After Game of Thrones, it was a tough act to follow. And while I'm much more positive on the finale of Game of Thrones than some other people are...
Both of us are the adamant defenders of the ending of Game of Thrones.
Exactly. And so it wasn't exactly clear what they would follow it up with, and if they would be able to maintain the quality, if they would still be able to hit the zeitgeist, if they would make... I don't know, if they were trying to essentially replicate what worked for Game of Thrones and then miss to do something new, etc. There were a lot of concerns for me going into this show. And then there's also the relative weakness of the source material, because I'm not that big a fan of Fire and Blood, I have to say, and of the Dance of the Dragon storyline. And so I was very positive. Surprised. It's not that I hate it or anything, but I'm just not as big a fan as of the original story. And so for me, the series was really a revelation. Not only was it a technical marvel, and as always, casting and production values and acting, etc., everything top notch, but the story itself also improved on the source material in many ways. And so I really love it, and I can't wait for season 2.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I had... Like you, I didn't have very high expectation. I thought it would be a good show because they would have the HBO money, and they would have a showrunner and script and writers that know very good the books, and of course George Martin is going to support them. But after what, like you said, after the ending of Game of Thrones and after how big was Game of Thrones, it was very complicated to do a very good follow-up series. In fact, I don't remember almost no follow-up show that actually works. I remember they did a Joey show after Friends, if you remember that, and nobody watched that. And they tried to do like a spin-off of other shows, and the spin-off doesn't work most of the time. So I wasn't so sure about House of the Dragon, and I agree with you. It was a very good show, and I think that we got something better that we expected, but I also think that the show will be even better in the next seasons. I think that without time skips, with a more condensed timeline, without characters changing the actors every 2 episodes, I think the show will be far better in the next season. Don't you think the same?
I don't think it was a detriment to the show that they made the time skips and the actor changes. I really liked that element. It was something else, and I thought they pulled it off quite well. But I know that that is also very challenging for the viewers. And so, yeah, I guess season 2 will be a little bit more on the, let's say, crowd-pleasing side. At least that's my expectation.
Yeah. I think that we know the material. We know when we see young Laenor and they are a bit older Laenor Velaryon, we know who that guy is. But I know friends of mine that were a bit lost after the first time skip, and after some of the episodes they didn't understood what was happening. We know the material, and we love and we saw, of course, House of the Dragon like very carefully because we talk about the show online. But for people that just watch the show like they saw any other, that maybe for them Game of Thrones was the best fantasy show they ever saw. Maybe for them it was complicated to follow. Like, this girl in the past now has 3 children. Wow, how that happened? And so for some, I think it was complicated. But I think I agree with you. They saw very well the time skips, the election, the casting choices. I think were superb. The young Rhaenyra and Alicent and the older Rhaenyra and Alicent, I think they were very good election, and I agree with you. So next topic, we are also in the anniversary of The Rise of the Dragon, the book written by George R. Martin and our friend Elio Garcia and Lyndon Thompson. So, and what do you like about this book? And more specifically, because you're an historian, you studied history, you teach history every day as your work. What do you think about George writing fake story? You told before you didn't like too much Fire and Blood, but do you think it's actually interesting or could be interesting to read the story of a world like the World of Ice and Fire?
It is interesting enough, I'll grant it that. That's not the problem. And I mean, it recontextualizes the original story, which for me is the most interesting aspect of it, that it informs the world and what characters are doing, and that it adds more nuance and depth to the original story. But at least in Fire and Blood, it never added to its own story for me. It was a history book. And I didn't like it too much. I just have to say it was very samey with the tellings of the dynasty, and this is also a pet problem with me. I'm a historian by training, but the historical area that I like the least is the Middle Ages, and I just can't get into these dynasties and rulers and that kind of stuff. And I mean, Fire and Blood is nothing but. So this is just not my area of interest. So this is not to say anything about the quality of the stuff, but more my personal interests. Rise of the Dragon, especially the luxuriously illustrated and condensed version that Elio and Linda did, with some contributions by George R.R. Martin. I actually like more because it is more readable. It seems to have more of a focus on getting a story across as opposed to the information. It dispenses with much of the perspective stuff, with mushroom and that kind of shenanigans. And so I liked it a lot more. It was a more pleasurable read. And of course, the illustrations also are very nice, and everyone loves a well-illustrated book.
Yeah, for me, the book could be just blank pages, and I would just buy it for the illustration, because for me, illustration are so beautiful. And I have to say, I don't like the art of Fire and Blood. That style of black and white and so like hyper realistic drawing. This is a fantasy world. I want beautiful things. I want colors, and Fire and the Rise of the Dragon brought me a lot of colors, and I was very happy with all the colors and the colorful dragons, the colorful dresses, the colorful sigils of the houses, the colorful castles. I love something so visually. You're an historian, and I know the historian for the Middle Ages. They always complain that they paint the Middle Ages like a very gray, like everything is awful, not beautiful. Like in the Middle Ages, they didn't use colors. No, they did use colors. In the churches, in the historical buildings, they use colors. Maybe you don't see now the colors because after centuries they have decayed, but they had amazing colors in the past. So you don't have to paint that time, like that age, like it was so black and white and gray, and they also like the beautiful things. So I like when I saw a book with so many colorful things. You like the illustration, so?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the illustrations are great. I also like the ones in Fire and Blood. I had no issue with the more, let's call it realistic style with the black and white. This is an area I gravitate towards. I'm not too much of a high fantasy person, so that style actually meshes more with me. But I like both all right.
Yeah. Well, now let's talk about essays and theories. And I always talk about two of your most famous essays written in Tower of the Hand more than a decade ago, I think. And it was two of the first things I translated for Los Terrenos. I remember mailing you, asking you and the people in Tower of the Hand if I had the permission to translate them into Spanish, because when I read, I totally got in love with them. And as I always said, the essays and theories were so good that George R. Martin made it canon. George R. Martin brought more info about them, like confirmed them in the World of Ice and Fire, and that for me is crazy. So the first one, and one that I absolutely love, and I think that everyone who loves A Song of Ice and Fire loves this time, what the origin of A Song of Ice and Fire, that is Robert Rebellion. So in fact, the origin of Robert rebellions are the Southern's ambitions of House Stark. So please, very briefly, because I think you could talk like half an hour about this, but to present you, the original author of the theory, what are the Southern ambitions of House Stark?
So the Southern ambitions go back on something that Lady Dustin says in A Dance with Dragons, because she criticizes Rickard Stark, the father of Eddard Stark, for having Southern ambitions and for having those instigated on him by the Maesters. That's the general argument she's making. And she's not going into detail what these Southern ambitions are, but scattered across A Dance with Dragons, especially in some of the earlier books as well, are some familial connections. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying like the history informs and recontextualizes the original story. For me, it just started to click when I was connecting some dots. And this, I want to stress that this isn't a theory that I would say is like originally there. Like when Martin wrote A Game of Thrones in 1996, I do not think that stuff was in there. It's like the Blackfires. It may have gardened out. And if you are correct, and he really did read my stuff and then later make it canon, which I don't think, but thanks for the compliment, then that would make absolute sense, because it's just one of these readings. If the theory is true, great, it recontextualizes the world in a way, but if it's not true, it doesn't change anything. So I don't rely on any secret identities or stuff like that. Yes. So that just as a preface. And what got me thinking is that when you look at what the text is saying about marriages between houses, the characters continually stress that you usually marry within the bounds of your own kingdom. So the Tyrells will marry Florence or stuff like that, and the Tullys are marrying Wentz, and the Starks are marrying Dustins, because you want to give something to your vassals. And then you have this weird thing in A Game of Thrones where all the major families marry into each other. And you can explain this, of course, with this being the first novel and all the smaller houses not yet being invented, which is probably right. But I got to think, and I was thinking, yeah, this makes sense, actually, as kind of a, let's put it in quotation marks, conspiracy, which is those Southern ambitions Lady Dustin speaks of, because you have a multitude of marriages between kingdoms in the great houses. So Stannis Baratheon marries into House Florent. The Tullys, the Starks, and the Arryns all get engaged with each other. Baratheon marries Lannister.
It has no precedent. If you look at the family trees of Westeros, nothing has happened like what happened during that age.
Exactly. And once again, I would argue that this is an artifact of Martin not having developed the world like that in 1996. But again, it makes also sense as a conspiracy, which he might have retconned later in. And the idea is that the houses were up to something, because all those marriages were made before all this stuff with Lyanna and Rhaegar was going down. Yeah. And then you have the big tournament at Harrenhal, which was obviously some kind of conspiracy, although no one knows what. Jaime is kind of stumbling onto half-truths, and Rhaegar seems to have been involved in some capacity. And I do not, to my knowledge, I do not make any claim to be just the specific goals of the Southern Ambitions conspiracy. But it seems to me the general outline was for the great houses to get more influence than they had usually enjoyed under the Targaryens, and to take a more active hand in the governance of the realm, either with or without Rhaegar.
You don't, because my conclusion would be they wanted to put Rhaegar as king and dethrone King Aerys. He would have a very unfortunate accident. Maybe he goes hunting and he falls from his horse. The new king will be Rhaegar. I think that was their main goal, I guess.
I think it would have been much more straightforward than that. I would assume that they wanted to call a council or something like that, and maybe even in Harrenhal, because most important people were there, and they could have just proclaimed whatever they wanted to proclaim then and there. Like saying here, Aerys lost his marbles. We are deposing him. He's going into his well-earned retirement. Hail to the new King Rhaegar. You don't need to kill him. There's no need for an assassination or anything. You can just depose him. essentially. And I think that was the general idea, and then it went all out the window when he got wise because of Varys's interference and appeared on the scene and threw all haywire in those plans. That, by and large, is the Southern ambitions conspiracy, and I think it was largely confirmed by, as far as we know, by the World of Ice and Fire.
I agree with you, and I agree with the idea of the council, but there is something that I don't agree at 100% with you, is that there has never been a king that has been like in a political way deposed of his role. There has been even a proclamation of a new king while the previous king was alive. In Westeros, it has never happened. I posted in Los Terrenos in the last weeks. It says about how the kings who have sit there on throne die, and half of them has been killed or assassinated or had a very weird and sudden illness that suddenly, I don't know why Viserys II was a great king, but suddenly he suddenly died very suspiciously because he was perfect 2 months ago. So Westeros has a very long story and tradition of killing kings. That's why I love your idea of a council, but I think that like promoting Rhaegar as king would be complicated if Aerys is still alive, because I told you there has never been a king that has like given up the crown to his son. Actually, it has never happened in Westeros.
That's true. I have no stock in my thing. It's just my gut feeling. Basically, you're making perfectly valid arguments. You might as well be right. So I'm not fighting you on that. What you say makes sense. We just don't know what the plan is, and I guess we will never know.
Yeah, totally. Because the actors that orchestrated that Southern Ambitions, and as you said, like a conspiracy, are all of them because all of them dead. Tywin Lannister was still alive in our age, but he was dead. Hoster Tully, Jon Arryn, they were all dead. We don't know if Doran Martell was part of it. I guess he wasn't, because Martells were married with the Targaryen. So I guess, but Elia Martell was the wife of Rhaegar. But I guess Rhaegar is Dorne is so far away from the rest and the north. So I guess they were kept apart. Nobody cares about the Greyjoys. Robert Baratheon was not a political player. He was just a tool used by the others, I guess, to start a rebellion. Don't you think the same, that Robert was not a political mind? He was just the face that they needed in order to win the war, no? Don't you think the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, and there are characters like Hoster Tully and Jon Arryn that I think they would be so great to know more about them, but I think we are late to see that. Well, you have to
look into the text again. Rickard Stark and Stefan Baratheon are the other two players, and they just die, which throws a wrench in all of that. You have Hoster Tully, you have Stefan Baratheon, you have Jon Arryn, obviously, and you have Rickard Stark. And of these four people, two are killed. One by an unfortunate accident, the massacre, the shipwreck in the bay, and the other one is murdered by Aerys when his son does stupid stuff, and so the whole Southern Ambitions plot collapses in itself and civil war breaks out. But I do not think that was the plan. That is my major argument.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And well, the other is say that one I translated 10 years ago and I absolutely love, and it was amazing. I think that the Wall of Ice also more or less confirmed or gave more hints that what you posted, you wrote was actually true, was the decadence of the Night Watch. Was how the Night Watch 300 years ago was so powerful, and now in the reigns of King Joffrey or King Robert is a collapsed institution that has no power. And you said that the key was that the royal peace kills the Night Watch. It's an amazing idea, so please explain it to the audience that has not read this. Say that I will hit them with a stick because they should have read that essay before.
Yeah, this is the same thing as with the Southern Ambitions. It makes a lot of sense, and it plugs some holes, which I think are early installment weirdness. And Martin didn't really think about it when he wrote all of that stuff in 1996, because back then, the 300 years period over which the decline of the Night's Watch happened was a long period. But when you put it against thousands of years before, it is rapid. And all the details we get over the first 3 books up until the end of A Storm of Swords, which was published in 2000. The details that we get is like the Night's Watch is more or less at the same strength up until the beginning of the Targaryen conquest. Because when after like 80 years, I think it is, when the old king arrives and makes them leave the Night Fort, which is the biggest castle, which they cannot maintain anymore, they can still maintain the other, like, 16 castles. And so, like, 200 years before the start of the story, they are still manning 16. And at the beginning of our story, they can barely hold on 3. So something has to have happened. And no one is commenting on it. So it has to be a structural reason that people hardly understand and have blind spots about. And the King's Peace just makes sense. So I was thinking about this as well, and it all clicked for me. And what I was arguing was, we are reading about many petty wars between the petty kings before the arrival of the Targaryens. They were always at war. We are being told that from several characters at several points in the story, so it is very trustworthy as a statement. And this means that you have a lot of people that are on the losing side of wars, that get captured and that get exiled. You have houses being eradicated. You have people caught on the battlefield, etc., etc. And all those people, if you do not want to massacre them, they have to go somewhere. And the Night's Watch is just a perfect place for them to go, because you have nobles who are going to the wall, and if they are coming to the wall from all corners of the realm, you also have a need to ensure that normal people go with them, because it is not very good to be a chief if you have no Indians. So what these people do is essentially recreate, like cosplay, their old wars and social structures at the Night's Watch, which is also the reason why it is so concentrated on knights and on sword fighting and all of that.
They have the shield room. The shield room for me is the key of this.
Yes, exactly. The shield hall from A Dance with Dragons. That all meshes with that idea that they essentially continued their conflicts just within the confines of the Night's Watch. So now they weren't fighting like Melister versus Pike anymore, but it was like Longhall versus the Shadow Tower. Who would get the most wildlings or something like that? And this kept the Night's Watch strong because it would still add to house prestige and would lead to the houses sending constant supplies to the wall. And when that ended with the Targaryen conquest, the whole reputation of the watch quickly deteriorated, and it didn't become relevant anymore for the nobles to compete within the confines of the Night's Watch, and therefore their houses didn't draw honor from it anymore and didn't support them anymore, with the notable exception of the North, which is the least populous and rich kingdom. So that good that does to you. And that is the theory I have for the decadence of the Night's Watch.
It's perfect. The creator of the theory totally explained. I cannot add anything. The only thing I can say that if you want it written to read it, I posted it in Los Reinos, the original text and your translation, of course, but I cannot add anything. It absolutely fits perfectly. It explains how an institution that was so powerful in the past is now in that very, very poor state. And I think they also fits the lore, the story of the Seven Kingdoms as kingdoms, because every kingdom has, as Stefan said, his petty lords. I am going to fight against you just for a meal, for what gets this part of the river, for this hill that has some things that I can grow there. They have strawberries in that hill. I'm going to fight you because I want to eat the strawberries, and if you are the owner of that hill, you will get those strawberries that I like. So some stupid things, but petty lords, as you say, fight about the stupid things, and they created that environment where the losers of that small conflict go to the ball. So you explained it perfectly. I can only clap and congratulate you for having those ideas. And well, let's move to the next topic because it was super. So next topic. I have been reading you since a decade ago, since 2011, when I first started, when I read A Song of Ice and Fire, far later than you. And I remember we shared opinions about the future of A Song of Ice and Fire. And I was preparing this interview or this chat with a friend. I was reading and read Ask Me Anything at AMA that you did in 2015. I guess you won't even remember that. And I remember you were saying things in that Reddit chat with people that was asking you question. I remember you said, well, I think that Bran will never leave the cave. Oh, I think that Jaime will never hook up with Brienne. And I totally agree with you. Then Game of Thrones happened, the last season of Game of Thrones happened, and I think now all of us agree that Bran is going to leave the cave, because he's going to be the king of Westeros. And we don't know about Brienne and Jaime, but it's not so crazy that they actually hook up in one moment of the book. So I wanted to ask you, what things do you think wouldn't happen in Winds of Winter and Dream of Spring? And after Game of Thrones, now you think it could be possible? Of course, Bran leaving the cave, being king is the biggest one. But do you have any other thing that you think this won't happen in the books, but then after the show ended, you say, well, maybe this could happen in the future?
That's a very hard question. I am agreeing with you that Bran leaving the cave and becoming king has become much more likely, and many people have explained reasons and found textual evidence that supports this claim by the Fisher King imagery and all of that. I would say there is not much in the text that lets me believe in a hookup between Jaime and Brienne. I have a very pessimistic outlook on their life expectancy in the books, I have to say. I do not assume that both of them will be around for the great finale.
Do you think that I am sure Jaime will die? Do you think that Brienne will survive? I think Brienne will survive.
I have no idea, but I just do not see this version of the story play out like it did in the movie, in the series. But I might be wrong on that. Again, this is nothing I have stock in. I have total confidence in Martin writing this in a great way, and in the series, it made perfect sense. I like the scene a lot, and I don't have any problems with it. And I mean, the same is true about all these endings. They are built on what the show did before, and the show necessarily diverges from the books. There is no Night's King, so who will Arya stab to death? Stuff like this. You cannot use any of this. I think Beric Dondarrion will never ever be around for that stuff. I'm not really sure the Hound will ever return from the Quiet Isle, but the show needed to keep these actors and these characters around. So it is very hard to say how much of it is in the original plan. And then, of course, there is the fact that Martin watches all of this stuff as well and might be influenced by it to change his plans. So I think it's a little bit of a fool's game to go that far into the future. Ask me again if the Winds of Winter is out. I think then we will have a much clearer picture of what the end game will look like. Right now, we are missing too much context.
I agree with you, and I wanted to ask you about two questions that appeared in that Reddit Ask Me Anything in 2015, and you were saying there won't be no Clegane Bowl, and you just said, and you talk about that, and you said, I think it was very, very, very insightful, and you were like good guessing. You said, I think that Sansa will be queen in the north. And I think that she won't marry anyone. She won't be crowned queen in the north because she has married some lord. Because she actually, for herself, like Queen Elizabeth, will have the power to be crowned queen in the north. So now you still think that there won't be a Clegane Bowl in the books, as you said that you think the Hound won't leave the Quiet Island, and you still think that Sansa will be crowned queen in the north?
I mean, the Clegane Bowl theory was positing that the two will fight as part of Cersei's trial, and I still hold to that won't happen. The Faith will not put forth Sandor Clegane as its champion. Yeah. It is possible, I assume, that Sandor Clegane will in the end search out Gregor, but I'm still not certain. I mean, I trust in Martin that he would write it well, but it just doesn't seem a story beat that I'm hot on seeing, I have to say. As for Sansa as the Virgin Queen, maybe, but I see her actually marrying Harry the Heir and using him like as a front.
Wow.
But maybe not. This is once again one of those storylines, can go either way. I have no stocks in either way.
I think that Sansa will be the fiancé of Harry the Heir, but before actually the wedding happens, something bad happens to Harry the Heir. Maybe the wildlings attack the Vale. Maybe she has to move to the north, and something happens with Harry the Heir that he cannot follow Sansa. He has a very unfortunate accident. But I think that talking about Sansa, do you think she will be queen of more than the north at the end? She will be queen of like the north, the Riverlands, and maybe even the Vale? So that's too much.
No, I don't think so. But I don't know. I actually, it is very hard to talk about the political outlook after the end game because we just do not have any idea. There will be so many people will die in that. It is very hard to say what the final outlook of these areas will look like. I don't even know if there will be Lannisters around afterwards. So it is a little bit, I don't know, poking around in the fog with that kind of stuff. Both of it might work. You could imagine her as the heir to Robb and his kingdom, but I feel this kingdom is Jon's. And Jon at this point will be done with that kingdom, and maybe that specific kingdom then also dies with him. And I don't know if the Riverlands will ever accept Robb's testament, etc., etc. There are just so many moving parts. I don't have a clue. But I do think that Sansa will end up as a ruler of something that is loved by the people. And that is the important thing, not so much what she's actually ruling.
The famous quote: "When I will be a queen, I want to be loved." Is the fame for me? That's the total line that foreshadows everything that will happen to her. In the same way that Arya has that foreshadowing line about traveling to Westeros, traveling outside Westeros. He asked Ned. I remember that at the end of the show. Like, I don't know where I read it, but in a Game of Thrones in the first book, he asked Ned. He asked his father about, in the future, could I be a warrior or be a mercenary, or could I travel outside Westeros? And wow, why is Sansa talking about Arya thinking about something like that? So I think that Arya living in Westeros, a la Elisa Farman, for me is right. And about Sansa, my point is that I think that Ed Mortali, that I know you love Ed Mortali, and thanks to you, I also love Ed Mortali, champion of the small folk. A lot of my ideas of A Song of Ice and Fire comes from you, Stefan. That's the truth. After reading you and listening to you many times. So I think that Ed Mortali will be alive at the end of the story. I think that, at least what I think that George would like to give him that after all that he has suffered. He has suffered a lot. So I think George is not a psycho. George is not a nihilistic guy. And I think that some people that have suffered a lot at the end will get a good thing. And I think that Ed Mortali will be one of those people that will get a good ending. I guess he will survive. I don't know about Robert Arryn, about the young Robert Arryn. I think he may be alive, but if he's dead, Harry the Heir will be the heir of the Vale, and if not, then goes to Sansa too. So we can discuss about that, and I am absolutely sure that Sansa will be the queen in the north at the end. Rickon won't be around. I don't know if Rickon will be dead or he will just won't be fit to be governor of anything. Jon will be in the north. Bran will be the king of Westeros, and Arya is younger than Sansa. So for me, Sansa is no brain, queen in the north. But I wanted to ask you about other things that are nice. So now that I ask you, why do you love so much Ed Mortali? We are going to print a T-shirt of "We love Ed Mortali," something like that.
Yeah. So Ed Mutali, as you said, champion of the small folk. I just always liked that he brings the people in to protect them. He is the one Lord to remember his oath. I mean, it's stupid that he does it, and he is an idiot. But that one thing that he's sincere about, they are my people. And I need to protect them. I am there for them. That is the reason why they are paying taxes, etc. The reciprocity of the feudal contract, that we only really see it with Ed Muir. And this is something I really love. For all the rest, I mean, Stephen Atterwell has more or less debunked my earlier theory about him not being that responsible for the stone mill. But I don't want to go into it anymore. Like, as I said, he's an idiot and he makes many mistakes, but he has a good heart, and that counts for something.
Yeah, totally. And well, the final question, because we have been talking about 50 minutes, and you have a family and responsibilities, and me too. And the final question, is there any recent Song of Ice and Fire theory that you read and like it a lot? I know that in Boiler of the Hour, sometimes people ask Son and you about some theories. I remember I recorded a video and translated the essay by John Magician, talking about how the others were looking for. They thought that Waymar Royce was an Stark, and Waymar Royce is so similar to Jon Snow that that's very suspicious. So is there any recent theory that you read in the last months of years that you actually like and wanted to say something about it?
I don't know what counts as recent. The last big theory I was into is from Emmett Booth, which is the Armageddon of Euron thing. Wow. The Eldritch Apocalypse.
Of course, Eldritch Apocalypse. Yeah.
But that's not really counting as recent, I guess. It's now 6 or 7 years old. But that is the last one I was really into.
Before the Forsaken, remember?
Yeah, sometime, I think that's 6 or 7 years now. Time flies, as we already noticed. But yeah, that's the one. Other than that, no. I have to admit, I'm not that deep into the community. And the current way of theorizing, because a lot of it is happening on YouTube, I guess. And I do not follow them.
Stefan, you are not missing anything. They are not like new, fresh material, good material recently. Trust me, there has not been no like innovation in the last, I think, 3, 4, 5 years of the fandom. The John Magician theory I told you about, he wrote it like 6, 7 years ago. And final question, you posted it in the Reddit, ask me anything. You, like me, think that, or you think like Elio, that the theory by your friend Sonty Collins was Tywin Martell poison by Oberyn Martell?
Maybe. The beauty about the theory is that it doesn't matter either way. If he was poisoned, Tyrion just sealed the deal. If he wasn't, then he wasn't. It's just it can be true either way. It is just a very fun theory, and it is a very good excerpt, or a very good poster child, basically, of the kind of theories that Sean likes. You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Stefan. It was so great talking with you. We will do this again. I don't know, in a video or like other times in a text interview, but I absolutely love this. It was so great talking with you. I hope we can see each other again, of course, personally in a few months or next year, whatever, but just talking with you was amazing. Of course, everybody should listen and read what he posted in the Boiler of the Hour in his podcast, and support him and read him the Nerdstream era and everything. Stefan is so great. So, Stefan, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It is an honor talking to you, and I will always be indebted for being my host in Madrid when I was stranded. So
Stefan has slept in this house. This is true.
Yeah, I remember the bed that's behind you. Thank you very much. So, thanks everyone for listening to this, reading the theories, supporting the podcast, etc., etc. So until next time, my friend.
Okay, goodbye. Bye. Adios. Auf Wiedersehen.